Hello everyone, I am Storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time you watching? Now comfortable and relax, let's get started. I found a disturbing dark web video series, and the star of the show looks exactly like me. This happened almost a month ago, but it's only as of today that I had the wherewithal to start writing it all down. I want to share what happened to me as part vent and part precautionary tale, and so I hope you understand why I'm keeping the details vague. I'm 21F and about to graduate college. Since sophomore year, I've worked part-time as a barista at a coffee shop. Up until a few weeks ago, it was a great gig. I was well paid, I got free pastries, and many of my co-workers became close friends of mine. One of said co-workers is relevant to this story, and to protect her privacy, I'll refer to her as Lydia henceforth. Every once in a while I would get hit on by a patron, but it never escalated beyond a few sometimes creepy comments. I had previously never felt unsafe at my workplace, especially with all of my co-workers and regulars around. That changed about a month ago, when this whole ordeal began. It was around 4 in the afternoon, a pretty quiet time for the cafe, and I was refilling the pastry display. All of a sudden, Lydia comes up to me and says, "Hey, that guy at table 10 has been staring at you for a really long time. Do you two know each other?" I looked at the corner table and instantly saw the patron in question. He wasn't a regular, and he was a lot older than our usual clientele. Probably in his late 50s. He had large light blue eyes and thick, worm-like lips. I expected him to look away after I spotted him, or maybe to give me a suggestive wink and smile. The patron did neither. Not only did he continue staring at me, but he did so with an expression of pure shock on his face. He looked as though he'd seen a ghost. After an awkward staring contest, he rose from his seat and approached the counter. Before I could do my usual spiel, "How was the drink, sir? Can I help you out with anything else today?" The man said, "Angelica? That's not my name, sorry." "Oh, right, it's only a stage name then." His voice was soft and high-pitched, as if atrophied. I had no clue what he was talking about and told him as much, albeit in more polite terms. What followed was a brief but frustrating conversation. The man, seemingly convinced that I was someone else, kept asking me about a video series that he'd seen me in. Specifically, he was interested in commissioning me for a video. By the way he danced around the exact content of said videos, I had a feeling that he was alluding to pornography. At one point, he mentioned that name of what I presumed to be the platform he was watching these videos on. I obviously won't give the exact name here, but for the purposes of this account, I'll pseudonymize it as Doves. After some more back and forth, I was starting to think that the guy wasn't completely all right in the head. It would explain his insistence and his generally strange demeanor. However, just as I was about to ask him to leave, the man suddenly went quiet, sighing as though collecting himself. After a moment, he gave me a wink. I remember his eyelids audibly clicking as they opened and shut. "You don't have to be nervous," he told me. "I'm a fan of yours. Look." He then took his phone out of his pocket, spent a minute searching for something, and then held the phone out to me. I don't know what got into me exactly. Sheer curiosity, I guess. But I took the phone from his hands to look at the image he'd pulled up. On the greasy screen was a photo of a young woman in an empty white room. The lighting was harsh and flat, lending an uncanny effect to an already bizarre composition. The woman stood close enough to the camera that you could only see her body from the waist up. She held her arm out towards the camera, showing off what seemed to be a puncture wound on her forearm. There was a large bruise encircling the area, and the wound itself was clearly infected, caked with old blood and pus. I looked up from the arm to her face, and despite the strange lighting, I was shocked by how much it looked like my own. She had my eye color and shape, My nose, my jaw, even my freckles. I dropped the phone onto the counter with a gasp, and the man scrambled to pick it up. "What the fuck is that? Where did you get this photo?" I shouted, losing all pretense of nonchalance. The cafe went quiet, customers looking over at us and a few of my coworkers stepping closer to me. Seeing this, the man scowled and began muttering under his breath. I only caught a few words, uppity bitch and good money among them. He exited the shop in a huff, leaving an untouched cup of coffee on the corner table. After he left, I took 15 in the break room to compose myself. The photograph of the woman burned in my mind's eye. This Angelica seriously could have been my long-lost identical twin. I pulled out my phone and did a preliminary search for doves. The website, at least I assumed it was a website, that the man had mentioned, but I saw nothing that looked like a content-sharing platform. I resolved to do a more thorough investigation once I returned home and had access to a computer. I made it through the rest of my evening without further incident. I worked the closing shift that day, 2 to 10 at night. When at last my coworkers and I finished all of our closing tasks, I put on my coat and stepped out of the building. The moment I felt the cold air on my face, the thought of walking 2 blocks to my car made me sick with fear. Lydia walked me to my car, which I greatly appreciated. She's a good head shorter than me, but she carries, so I felt a hell of a lot safer braving the dark beside her. When I reached my car, I checked the trunk and back seat. After assuring myself that there was no one waiting for me inside, I bid my friend good night and we parted ways. I had plenty of time to reflect during my 30-minute drive home. Embarrassing as it is to admit, I was a former pageant kid. I competed for most of my childhood, at the behest of my former beauty queen mother. As a teenager, my mom tried to get me into modeling. It never went anywhere, but the amount of times my parents made me sit for digitals gave me some long-term scopophobia. To this day, I don't have any public social media as a result. I think anyone would be disturbed if a stranger confronted them in the way my customer did me. But my background made the experience impossible to shrug off. I needed to figure out who the hell this Angelica woman was, even if I knew I might not like what I discovered. I got back to my apartment at around 10:30 at night, and the first thing I did was grab a drink, hoping it would soothe my anxiety. Unfortunately, the alcohol seemed to have the complete opposite effect. Never before had I regretted living alone so much. The fact that I lived on the first floor of the apartment building, usually a great convenience, also seemed at that moment to be a point of vulnerability. I checked that all of my doors and windows were locked before settling into my desk to begin my research. When checking the lock on my bedroom window, I stole a glance outside at the street. My apartment building has no attached parking garage, so the streets outside are lined with cars at all hours of the day and night. I've become familiar with my neighbors' cars to the point where I can recognize when one of them is missing. It's for this reason that I picked up on the unfamiliar Cherokee XJ across the street. The dark blue car, which I initially mistook for my neighbor's Isuzu Trooper, blended in well with its surroundings despite being an unusual model. I don't think I would have noticed it at all had the events of the day not left me so paranoid. I didn't see anyone inside, and it wasn't as though there was anything I could do about it. So I just closed my shutters and focused on the task at hand. At 10:45, I sat down at my desk with nothing but a woman's name and what I believed to be the name of a website. For a full hour, I poked around on the web to no avail. I started off with searches like Angelica arm puncture wound video and Angelica arm white room doves, and then tried more detailed queries. I searched around increasingly obscure forums dedicated to all manner of topics from body horror art to grotesque auto-portraiture photography. Several drinks later, it occurred to me that I might be conducting my investigation in the wrong place, more specifically on the wrong layer of the web. I hadn't wanted to confront the notion previously, but there was a chance that Angelica was producing some kind of self-harm fetish content And if that were the case, I wasn't sure how much I'd find about her content on the surface web. Since I don't want anyone reading this to go on to search for the website, I'm not going to get into the details of my search. I will say, though, that once I got on to Dread, it wasn't nearly as hard to find as I thought. By midnight, I had found what I was looking for. The website's homepage was minimalistic, white text on a pure black background. It had a heading, Diov 3S, and a subheading, 3 friends creating exclusive content with love. Beneath were 3 names that let me know I was in the right place. Angelica, Mary, Adam. I steeled myself and clicked on Angelica. This portion of the site was a single sprawling page that seemed to scroll for miles. Up at the top was a message, supposedly written by the woman herself. Angelica, 18, durable. A3 my fans, no longer accepting commissions. Price varies on a per video, per photo set basis. Click title for duration, shot thumbnail, price info. Videos before January 14th, 2023 do not have audio. No refunds. Beneath the introductory text was a subheading that read, free sample, and beneath that was an embedded video, 2 minutes in duration. I pressed play. The video buffered for a long while, then began. It faded from black into a familiar shot. In the same white room I'd seen in the customer's picture, there she stood. She, Angelica, looked awful, far worse than she'd looked in the photograph. Her jaw clenched and unclenched strangely, and her eyes were wide and darting, like a wild animal's. There was a giant, half-healed gash in her cheek, and her left arm was covered in bandages, perhaps suggesting that this video was filmed after the customer's photo was taken. The woman wearing my face gave the camera an uncertain smile. She held up a hand, showing her palm, then turning it around to show the back. She then slowly set her hand, palm down, on a small wooden table below her. The camera tilted downwards, following her hand in such a way that indicated another person was filming with a handheld. The camera lingered on her hand for a moment. I heard someone inhale, and then a hammer came down on the woman's hand. After the blow, the camera jerked back up to her face. She started making this pained moaning sound. Her mouth twisted, and I saw tears welling up in her eyes. The camera moved back down to her hand, where a deep bruise was already welling up under her skin. I paused the video here to scroll down, reading through the myriad of titles listed beneath it. The most recent link was called Blunt Force 33, followed by Blunt Force 32, Puncture 12, Eye Infection, Needles Under Nails. I felt dizzy. I had to stand up and pace around the room to keep from puking my guts out. Maybe I should have stopped there, but for whatever reason, I felt like I had some responsibility to finish. I pressed play once more. Down again came the hammer, this time landing atop the knuckle of her forefinger with a crack. 4 more blows rained down on the hand, 1 for each knuckle. By the end, the sounds coming from the woman didn't seem entirely human. It didn't sound like me, but it was hard to tell. I'd never been in that kind of pain before. I didn't know what I'd sound like. In the last few seconds of the video, the camera was raised and angled downward such that you could see both Angelica's face and mangled hand. The shot gave the viewer a better view of her chest and the small, spade-shaped birthmark a few inches beneath her clavicle. It was this all too familiar mark that removed any lingering ambiguity about what I was watching. Angelica was no coincidence, no circumstantial doppelganger. She was a deep fake of me. When the video ended, I sat staring at the final frame until my laptop went to sleep, too shocked to do anything else. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I still can't. I've done everything right. All my life, I've kept my socials private and generally minded my own business. I've stayed modest, low profile, and out of the spotlight for all of my young adulthood. I never even sent nudes to my ex-boyfriend, despite his insistence, because I was afraid of what would happen to them if we ever had a nasty breakup. As it turned out, we did have a messy breakup. In the immediate aftermath of that video, as I racked my memory for answers, I couldn't help but think of my ex. If I were a public figure, then the culprit behind the deep fakes could have been anyone. But for a nobody like me, it had to be someone close, someone with access to my private photos. The thought made me shudder. Could my ex really have taken things that far? Did he actually hate me that much? I had a sudden urge to call him and demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't get me far. It would be easy enough for him to lie if he was the culprit, and then he would know I was on to him. There was much left for me to explore on the DOV3S website, but after my discovery, I wasn't in the right state of mind to keep investigating. I thought about calling someone, maybe Lydia or my parents, but for some reason, the thought of doing so filled me with tremendous embarrassment. Even though I knew deep down that it wasn't my fault, I couldn't help but feel ashamed of the videos, even if I had had no role in their creation. I needed sleep, but knew it would be nearly impossible, and so I popped a few sleeping pills and crossed my fingers. After tossing and turning in bed for a few minutes, I got up to use the bathroom, which required walking down the hallway past my front door. When I got to said door, I stopped, noticing a strange shadow coming from the hallway. It looked as though someone had placed an object right outside my door. I walked closer to look, about to crouch to peek under the door, when the shadow suddenly moved. It hadn't been an object at all, but rather a person standing in front of my door. I heard their footsteps thudding down the carpeted hallway. By the time I looked through the peephole, it was too late to see anyone, and I certainly wasn't about to open the door to look for them. I immediately suspected that it had something to do with the blue Cherokee, which was still parked across the street when I stole a glance out the window. Suddenly, I had no desire to sleep anymore, but the pills were already doing their job. I wanted to stay alert in case whoever was outside my door returned, but fighting against the drowsiness was like trying to outrun a monster in a nightmare. The last thing I imagined before I slipped into unconsciousness was my own face smiling jubilantly as a hammer smashed my hand into a bloody pulp. By morning, I nearly convinced myself that the previous night was a dream. There was no unfamiliar car outside my window, no one waiting for me when I opened my apartment door. When I looked at my laptop, however, DOV3S looked back at me. What a shame that it hadn't all been some horrible nightmare. I resumed my investigation. Clicking on any of Angelica's video titles took me to a new page. Each had a preview image and some basic info, including the length, date, and description of the video. The prices listed in Bitcoin seemed dependent on two factors: how long the video was and how graphic. Beneath were payment instructions, including a wallet address. I didn't know much about crypto and didn't own any, so I didn't purchase any videos as part of my research. Maybe that was for the best. I went back to the DOV3S homepage and navigated to Mary. Her page had a similar setup to Angelica's: selfie, profile, sample, and long list of videos. She was a pretty girl, Mary, and her photo reminded me a bit of Lydia, which made my heart hurt. From the selfie, I guess she was about 20 years old. Mary, 18, always clumsy. I'm limited edition. At first glance, it wasn't obvious what limited edition meant. Mary had fewer videos on her page than Angelica, but there were still well over 100. I scrolled down to Mary's sample video, which was also 2 minutes long. I pressed play. Instead of a white room, the video was set in a bedroom. The camera swept over pink walls before landing on a canopy bed. Laid out in the center of this bed, dressed in shorts and an oversized shirt, was a corpse. Long before the cameraman crossed the room, I could see the gash in its throat and the massive puddle of blood that had poured from it. The cameraman got closer and closer, moving with a steadiness that was likely in service of making the editing process easier. Right? This is all edited, I reminded myself. Mary looked incredibly real, though. Angelica's sample video had at times dipped into uncanny valley territory, which I had first dismissed as a consequence of the lighting. When it came to Mary's video, everything seemed much more authentic. The camera got so close to the gaping wound that I expected it to be shoved inside. Instead, it was raised to get a better shot of Mary's face. Her mouth hung open, and her green eyes were glassy and unfocused. After a few seconds, the camera panned down to her chest, and a gloved hand reached out from behind the camera, tucking a finger into the collar of her shirt and pulling down. I paused the video there. I didn't need to see what happened next. I scrolled down to the video list. Aftermath of a 7-story fall. Walked under a construction site. Farmer lady bales hay. The presiding theme in Mary's video seemed to be the fact that she died in or before them. Oddly enough, Mary's videos cost a fair bit more than Angelica's. I guess she had the larger following. The last profile on the DOV3S website belonged to Adam. I clicked on his name, scrolled down to view the photo, and was shocked when I recognized the man staring back at me. I couldn't remember his name, but I vividly remembered his face. His deep brown eyes and lopsided grin transported me back to high school. I had gone to school with him, that I knew for certain, and I was fairly sure that his father and mine were friends. If Adam was indeed who I thought he was, then our dads used to play golf together on the weekends. I switched back to Firefox and navigated to my high school's website, which allows you to view yearbook PDFs. I found him in 2019. He had been a senior that year, and finding his portrait in the graduating class section filled me with equal parts relief and sadness. For simplicity, I'll refer to DOV3S male model as Adam for the rest of this post, even though, like Angelica, it was only a pseudonym. I sent him a friend request on Discord after getting his handle from a mutual friend. While I waited for him to accept my request, I took a look at his page on dov3s.adam18, doing my best with what I have left. Between Angelica, Mary, and Adam, the latter's niche was the most straightforward. His sample video featured a quad amputee, arms and legs ending in smooth stumps at the elbows and knees. He sat on the floor of a white room identical to Angelica's, looking up at the camera as it moved to his side. A gloved hand gave Adam a beer bottle, which he accepted with a dubious expression. The deep fake, at least I assumed it was also a deep fake, was disturbingly good, capturing all sorts of micro expressions like a raised eyebrow and wrinkle of the nose. The rest of the 2-minute video was Adam attempting, unsuccessfully, to wrench the metal cap off of the bottle. His stumps were dotted with tiny pinpricks of blood by the end. There were only a few dozen videos on his page, and I ascertained from titles like Making Breakfast or Ironing a T-shirt that they involved Adam trying to accomplish basic domestic tasks despite his amputations. Well, with the exception of the first video ever posted to his page, entitled Making a Starfish, I had a pretty good idea what that video entailed, especially since it had the highest price tag of any of the videos I'd seen on the entire website. After an hour, Adam accepted my friend request. I introduced myself, he and I broke the ice for a while, and then I explained the situation to him. He confessed to me that he knew what I was referring to. Below is our Discord conversation from that point on, with square brackets indicating information I've censored. Adam, sorry for the delay. I'd almost finally forgotten about that LOL. I saw a picture of myself on an Unsolved Mysteries forum a couple years ago. It took me a while to track down more pics and figure out, yeah, this is actually a deep fake and not just someone who looks like me. I didn't know there were other people involved though. Me? So you never visited DOV3SO itself? Like you just saw reposts? Adam. Right, I acted for a few years when I was a teenager. Supper indie films, I wasn't famous at all. I thought it was a coincidence and some nut job randomly picked me as a face model for their art. Now that I know someone else from my hometown is involved, yeah, that feels personal. Crazy me. So you don't know who could have created the videos? Adam, to no clue, me. I kind of suspected my ex-boyfriend at first, but unless you jilted him somehow, I don't understand why he would target the two of us. Do you know my ex-boyfriend's name? Adam, not at all, sorry. Me, do you know the girl in this photo? Mary? She's the third person on the website. Adam, no, I don't recognize her. You mean, do you think we could meet in person to talk this through? I'm going to file a report with the IC3 and I could seriously use your input. Also, I assume you want to see the website for yourself? I could send you the link. Adam, Grace, I seriously appreciate you reaching out, but I really don't want to get involved in this. Me, are you serious? Why not? A crime has been committed against you, and you don't want to help me report it. Adam, our laws on this stuff are dicey as fuck. If they didn't put our faces onto nudes, I don't even know if we'd have the support of anti-revenge porn legislation. If reporting it will help you then, by all means, but realistically, I don't know what can be done, and I can't get into some complicated legal battle right now. Me, I don't even know what to say to that. Aren't you angry and disturbed? Adam, of course I am. This shit has eaten me alive for years. It's followed me everywhere. Yes, I'm angry, but I'm also just really fucking tired. It's the internet, and I was stupid enough to put my face on it. Me, you're not angry enough if you can't take 2 seconds to report it? Adam, you don't know me. Don't tell me I'm not angry enough. This stuff happens all the time, and it'll only start happening more often. You and I aren't special. It doesn't matter if you're old or young or famous or not, or if you've done everything right. It's not like anyone actually got hurt. I'm sorry that this happened to you, seriously. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I just want to move on with my life. Please don't contact me about this again. Adam went offline after that, and my hands shook with rage as I closed my laptop. The way he described the videos like an everyday occurrence, like a fact of modern society that we just had to come to terms with, made me feel like I was going insane. I couldn't accept that such a grotesque distortion of my face, my voice, my whole identity was just something I should get over. If he wouldn't help me, then I just have to continue looking for clues on my own. Neither of us recognized Mary, and I couldn't find a perfect match for her even in yearbooks from the early 2000s. The most obvious connection between Adam and myself was the fact that we attended the same high school, but we also lived in the same neighborhood. If Mary was also local to my hometown, then she likely attended one of the 3 high schools in our area. After digging through my contacts for a while, I reached out to 4 childhood friends who had attended a different high school than myself. I sent a screenshot of Mary's selfie to each of them, pretending I was trying to get in touch with an acquaintance who had grown up in our town. Only at 1:50 did I look at the clock and realize I was going to be late for my 2 o'clock shift. I got ready as fast as I could, but I still didn't make it to the coffee shop until 2:45. I parked in my usual street-side spot and hurried toward the shop. But before I could open the back door, Lydia emerged from the building. I didn't even get the chance to greet her before she grabbed me by the sleeve of my shirt and started tugging me back towards my car. Lydia, what? He came to see you. My heart sank. I didn't have to ask who he was. I told him you quit, she continued. He came up to me and asked me if you were working today. Told me he wanted to apologize for yesterday and start fresh. I said he spooked you so bad that you quit, but I don't think he believed me. He just left a few minutes ago. Lydia asked me what I wanted to do, but I didn't know myself. Did you see what kind of car he was driving? Lydia hadn't seen, but she had gotten a picture of the man, which she sent to me in case I wanted to file any kind of report. Even if it might seem like an overreaction to some, I knew the importance of starting a paper trail early, and so I thanked Lydia for keeping an eye out for me, and then phoned the non-emergency line from my car. There was little the police could do at that point, but they told me that I had done the right thing, even if I wasn't certain yet that I was actually being stalked. Feeling slightly better, I picked up some takeout, then returned home. When I got back to my lonely little apartment, I noticed boot prints in the carpet in front of my door. so light that I only noticed them thanks to my paranoia-induced vigilance. I tracked them from the end of my hallway to my door, then back to the building's exit. I suppose it could have been my landlord, though I doubted it. I completed a thorough sweep of my apartment before settling down for the evening. There was no indication that anyone had been inside since I left, except for a slightly misplaced lamp that I was 99% sure that I'd moved a few days prior. After looking around and wedging a chair under my front door handle, I sat down at my desk and scrolled through my new text messages. 3 of my 4 friends had responded. The first 2 apologized, stating that they did not recognize the woman in the photo, but that they would be happy to investigate for me. The third message, however, was everything I didn't want to hear. 1732. Hi, Grace. Long time no here. Is this a recent photo? Also, where did you see this woman? I'm asking because she looks a lot like a girl I went to middle school with named Redacted. I hadn't thought of this girl for years until I got your text, so I Googled her name, and it seems like she went missing in 2023. My blood ran cold. I looked up the name that I'd been sent and found only 3 local results: a middle school track and field team roster, a library art competition from over 10 years ago, and a missing persons report. Redacted County Sheriff's Office date, filed October 17, 2023. Reporting officer, redacted missing person. Name, redacted date of birth, April 9, 2003. Age 20. Sex female, race Caucasian. Race, Caucasian eyes. Green. Height, 5 feet 6 inches. Weight, 125 pounds. Hair, blonde, shoulder-length eyes. Green last seen. Wearing blue flannel shirt, black jeans, white Converse sneakers. Last known location, Redacted, was last seen leaving the Redacted Cafe in downtown Redacted, California at approximately 5:20 p.m. on October 16, 2023. She was walking south on Main Street in the direction of her home, but did not arrive. She was carrying a dark green backpack. Circumstances, family reported. Redacted missing at 8:45 p.m. after she failed to return home and was not reachable by phone. According to friends, Redacted had no plans to leave town and did not express any intent to run away. Her phone last pinged near Redacted Road around 6:10 p.m. Investigative status, BOLO issued to neighboring jurisdictions, local search and canvass, initiated no confirmed sightings after 6 p.m. phone, and social media activity inactive since disappearance. There was a photo of Mary at the bottom of the report. She looked younger than she did in her DOV3S selfie. And I spent a long time looking at her green eyes, thinking about how full of life they seemed. Her disappearance could have been completely random. She could have run away completely of her own volition for all I knew. And yet she could have just as easily stumbled into the hands of one of her fans. And I shuddered to think where she was or what she was doing now if that were the case. I filed 2 reports that night, one to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center regarding DOV3S, and one to my county's sheriff department regarding Mary. Before going to sleep for the night, I also opened up Discord, navigating to my conversation with Adam. Hoping that what I'd found might bring him to his senses, I sent him a link to Mary's report. Someone did get hurt, I said. I forwent the sleeping pills that night as a precaution, instead spending hours tossing around in bed, thinking of Mary. Wherever she was, as unlikely as it seemed, I hoped that she was all right. There's something horribly wrong with the whale fall I've been studying. The sea provides for itself and always has, a system in which the organisms that reside there give back to the biome long after death. This is the very purpose of a whale fall, the phenomenon in which the corpse of said mammal sinks to the bottom of the ocean to provide food for other aquatic creatures throughout the slow process of its decay. At the beginning of the year, I and a team of fellow marine biologists spent the better part of 3 months studying a whale fall that we'd named Titus. Our interest in it being that the carcass had settled in far shallower waters than expected for such an event. The consensus was that disease had spurred the creature to veer off course from its migratory path, where it had eventually died, stranded yet not alone, resting amongst the many organisms that would make their pilgrimage to feast on its remains. For the first few weeks of our study, this process went as expected. The arrival of various species of sharks, crustaceans, worms, and seals, documented by submarine and remote-operated vehicle expeditions. It was only when Titus's state of decomposition seemed to slow, even to have halted entirely, that our team noticed something had changed with the fall. Changed, or had been wrong with it since the beginning, a status so gradually revealed that we were only aware of it when it was too late to extricate ourselves from its grip. The animals that came to Titus to eat no longer left its side. Their mouths joined with it in perpetual union. In spite of this, the corpse no longer diminished, appearing much as we'd found it, an open cavern cut in its left side through which the rib cage gleamed, one eye eaten into a mangled pit, the other staring out into the deep as though it were still capable of sight. This inexplicable stasis fascinated and alarmed us more with each passing day. It must be some parasite or disease, my colleague Demetriou theorized. Whatever killed the whale is causing this new behavior in the scavengers. They're not eating the body, only performing a behavior that resembles it. That's why there's less breakdown than we would expect to see after death. Another of the team, Reynolds, said, "It's more than that. The whale's grown." The rest of us laughed, thinking that she must have been working for so long that her eyes had begun to play tricks on her. There's something hypnotic in the sea, even when you're on land, merely thinking of it. It's what drew me to the work to begin with. The fascination of things even experts have only just begun to understand and likely never fully will. You get caught up in it all sometimes. I know I have before. "I'm telling you the whale's grown," Reynolds insisted. "About a foot in length. Not much, but it's undeniably bigger than it was, and it shouldn't be. You don't have to take my word for it. Look at our most recent footage and compare it to the first images we took at the start." She was right, and how we'd all missed it I can't properly explain. We'd all put the same amount of time and effort into the study, should have seen the alteration as she did. But then perhaps we had simply not wanted to consider the implications of the fact, the weirdness of it all. "Parasites," Demetriou said again with satisfaction. "They're bloating the tissue, making it look like it's expanded." Reynolds shook her head. "That's not it. You can see that none of the animals around the whale have died or even lost significant weight, and what little they have shed isn't from starvation." "Then what?" I asked. I already knew what she was about to say, but it was so impossible that I didn't want to voice it myself, to suggest it as a reality. "Titus is feeding on the animals attached to it," said Reynolds. "Don't ask me how, but it is." "It's not the whale," Demetriou insisted sharply. "It's dead. Something inside it is preying on the scavengers, maybe. But why would you think that it's the whale itself?" This Reynolds couldn't answer, but there was a conviction in her eyes I knew could not be argued with. "We'll send the ROV out there for another tissue sample," I said. "Then we can analyze it and see what's changed." To prove who's right, I wanted to say, but didn't. The other members of the team agreed that this was the best approach, being that it was the least invasive option and safest for all involved. Reynolds, however, wasn't satisfied with the suggestion. "I want to get closer," she said. "I need to see for myself what's happening." "You mean take the submarine out there again?" I asked. "I mean, sure, we can do that eventually, but the ROV will give us a lot more useful data. We can capture one of the smaller specimens feeding on the whale so we can test it for parasites or disease." Demetriou and Barden were nodding along with this, but Reynolds had turned her head away at an obstinate angle, a muscle in her jaw twitching savagely. "Look," I said, "our last expedition was barely 2 weeks ago. I doubt that anything will have come about since then that's even visible to the naked eye. Reynolds drummed her right hand on a nearby desk. We could dive down to it, she said. The water is shallow enough. Not a good idea, said Barden. There are sharks and other predators feeding on the whale that might turn on us if they feel like it. I mean, I've dived with sharks before, but it's not something I'd recommend outright. They're unpredictable. Besides, we could end up disturbing the other scavengers, disrupting the natural process. It'll alter our findings. Reynolds got up from her chair and began to pace the laboratory, Barden watching her with a pensive disquiet. No dive, I said. If Demetriou is right, then it's really not safe to get that close to the whale, even in protective gear. It's better to be safe than sorry. You know that. Watching Reynolds' stubborn face twist, I felt a tug of unease, unable to understand why she was so set on the idea when she knew better. Fine, she said. No dive. She went out through the laboratory door, letting it bang shut in the frame behind her. Barden flinched and laughed shakily. Yikes, he said. What's going on with her? She's obsessed, said Demetriou, her lip curled. She's barely taken a break since we started. Skips meals, doesn't sleep. If you ask me, it's not about the work at all. What do you mean? I asked. You're thinking mental health stuff? Family issues? Demetriou shrugged. I don't know, but it's something. The other night, she was talking about the whale song we've been hearing on our last few trips, saying she thinks it's connected to the fall. It makes no sense, obviously. You'd better keep an eye on her, Heaney. You know her better than the rest of us. I sighed, aware of the accusation in Demetriou's voice. She's your problem, she meant, not ours. If there was something wrong, then she would have told me, I said. Reynolds isn't really one for keeping secrets. I think it's just the study, how odd it all is. I can't blame her for being a bit unsettled. I am too. If there is an infectious disease or parasite situation going on down there, we'll need outside help. She doesn't think that's what it is, though, said Demetriou. You heard her. She thinks that the whale's still alive somehow. You can't tell me that's a normal way of thinking. She looked at me in an almost suspicious fashion, as though she believed that I was implicit in covering up some secret. I'm sure she's just tired and a bit paranoid like the rest of us, I said. Let's just leave this for now. We'll send Mercutio out in the next few days. Is that okay? Mercutio was our ROV, piloted mainly by Demetriou, who had a background in engineering. Fine by me, she said, relenting slightly. But I'm not the problem, remember? By midweek, we'd set out in RV Sylvia, the team's research vessel, from which we were to direct Mercutio towards the whale fall. The entire team was restless with nerves and excitement, as we always were when on the verge of some discovery. I caught Demetriou casting Reynolds' disparaging looks across the control deck and shook my head at her. Prior to setting out on our venture, I'd pulled Demetriou aside again. Behave yourself today. We'll be recording the expedition. And besides, there will be other crew members aboard to make sure everything runs smoothly. We don't want to make a bad impression. They already think we're all going a bit mad, cooped up on our own out here in the facility. Demetriou had snorted at this and shuffled her shoulder out from under my hand. Say that to Reynolds, not me. She'll be the one that embarrasses us all. She's still talking about that insane theory, you know. I'll talk to her, I said irritably. But you need to concentrate on your job and not this pointless conflict. You've had a problem with Reynolds for months, since before any of this started, and I'm getting sick of it, Rhea. Remember what's important. Reynolds, for her part, remained quiet as the vessel sailed out from the research center and lowered Mercutio down into the water. She sat watching the control room monitors as the ROV surroundings filled the screen, leaning forwards with her chin on her fist as the dead whale Titus came into view. The corpse boiled with feasting animals, and more circled at a distance, deciding their place on the body. I still don't understand how they don't starve to death, said Barden suddenly. At least some of them should have, you'd think. It's some kind of symbiotic relationship, I'd guess, said Demetriou, turning Mercutio slightly to the left. The scavengers will survive until the parasites inside the whale drain them of all nutrition. After that, they'll die, fall away, and be replaced by the others attracted to the body. Pretty clever place to hide, if you think about it. Lots of live food around. Demetriou talked with a brash confidence I didn't quite believe in. I could see the stiff set of her wiry body, the way her left eyelid had begun to twitch at random intervals. She was as lost as any of us in all this, but it comforted her to pretend that she knew better, that we were all fools not to understand it as she did. We all fell silent as we crowded around the monitors, Mercutio's leisurely approach expanding the image of the whale fall. Titus lay like a drunken giant in that orgy of feasting, the one untouched eye gazing up at the camera as though inviting us to join in that revelry. Some of the smaller animals had begun to look noticeably fragile, and it struck me that, in the time we'd taken to prepare for our venture, whatever was in the whale had begun to feed with more rapidity than before. Reynolds was muttering something I couldn't quite discern over the chatter of the others in the room. "I'm going to try and get close enough to collect the samples now," said Demetriou. "Maybe from 2 different places. What's left of the meat still on the rib cage, and the areas where the scavengers are swarming now. They might give us different results." Reynolds twitched at this, but didn't speak, and I wondered what she was thinking. Did she really imagine that the whale had materialized this way at the bottom of the ocean? That it was some other entity that merely resembled a whale by chance or cunning evolution? Reynolds had always had a fascination with the unexplored quarters of the sea, what lurked in the trenches too far down to probe, without diver or vessel being crushed by the incredible pressures of the deep. When we had studied as novices together, she dreamed of stumbling across one of the lurking ancients depicted in sailors' mythology, the first of the modern world to catch a glimpse of them and thus prove their existence. Likely it was this long-held fantasy that had led her to see Titus as such a creature, if indeed that was her belief. I observed her with a new fascination, trying to interpret her slightest move or expression and never quite understanding what I saw. On the monitors, Mercutio had extended its mechanical arms to gather the first cross-section of meat from the fall. Demetriou narrowed an eye in concentration, withdrawing the manipulator back into the vehicle so as to place the sample into storage. Around it, the scavengers stirred, seemingly aware of the interloper. "They're curious," said Barden. "That's something." We all knew what he meant, having each had the same unspoken worry that the animals would have no response to stimulus, no more than gross on the flesh. Yet they did not detach themselves from the whale to follow the robot, only watch as it traversed to their side of the body. "All right," said Demetriou, "let's go again." "After you do that, see if you can pick up one of the crabs," I suggested. "They're small enough to transport." It was as I said this that a pair of tiger sharks that had been circling the whale turned sharply in towards Mercutio and snapped at it, ripping at the foam on its frame. "Stop moving it," I said. "They'll probably lose interest." Demetriou obeyed, but the sharks persisted. Their attacks, not the idle interest of animals encountering a foreign object, but those with intent to kill. "They're defending the whale," said Reynolds suddenly. "They know about us. Titus knows." "Don't say that," said Barden. "That's ridiculous." But I could tell by the way he was tugging the zip of his jacket up and down that he was nervous. His eyes tracked the other animals surrounding the fall, as though beginning to interpret their activity as Reynolds did. "Shit," said Demetriou. "I better get Mercutio out of there. We'll have to come back again another time, or we'll lose what we have already." I watched tensely as the ROV withdrew from the body of the whale. Only 1 out of 3 samples collected, its sides buffeted by the attempts of the sharks to tear it to pieces. My gaze was drawn down to the eye of the fallen Titus, the black alien globe seeming full of a paradoxical vitality, and I shuddered, glancing away from it. "You hear that?" said Reynolds into the quiet. "What's that?" snapped Demetriou. I don't need to be distracted now. Yet I saw her head twitch slightly as if turning her ear to some subtle noise in the air. Barden and Reynolds exchanged looks, and suddenly I saw them united, both in tune to the same sound. "What am I supposed to be listening for?" I asked. But then I heard it too, a faint but definite whale song. Every face in that room registered a like recognition, and suddenly I realized the danger of it, wondering how we'd all been led so rapidly into aligning ourselves with Reynolds' frenzy. "Let's not overthink it," I said. "It's the same school of whales we've seen in the area for ages. Demetriou, how are we doing?" "We're almost out," she said. "Somebody better tell the crew we want to go back to shore." Barden stood, nearly tripping over his seat. "I will." He couldn't seem to stand looking at the monitors, shielding his eyes with one raised hand as he scurried out of the room. We were all glad when the screens went off, except for Reynolds, who went across to the glass and touched it as though she might feel the whale through the surface. Demetriou rounded on me, her expression thunderous. "Don't," I mouthed. "Not now." Once we were safely back at the facility, I whisked Reynolds away and sat her down in one of the offices. "Deanna," I said, "what's going on? You're scaring everyone with all this stuff about Titus, putting ideas into people's heads that shouldn't be there." She shrugged, sullen and unmoved. "I think Demetriou's right," I went on. "We need to reach out to disease control. There's something infectious coming off that whale. We've all come into contact with samples, the water and the air nearby. We don't know how it's transmitted, but something is extremely wrong. But not in the way you think it is. What you're saying about the whale itself being alive and doing all this, it isn't possible." "I wouldn't say that," said Reynolds. "We don't know enough about the sea to know that it isn't a new organism. Who's to say that this whale, or this species that looks like one, isn't mimicking a major food source to call animals to it and provide itself with nutrients?" "There's not much proof of that yet," I said, "though I suppose it's a possibility. But the way you talk about it all makes it sound like there's something else you think is happening here. Something, well, I don't know. Irrational anyway." Reynolds fidgeted. "Not necessarily," she said. "I've had this hunch since all this started. Everyone has. They just don't want to admit it. I think the whale wants things to be part of it for other reasons than eating. Like anglerfish fusing during mating to ensure that they can breed when mates are scarce. But rather than breeding, the whale wants to expand itself. Just one organism made of many, growing and growing its territory. And this is intentional, you think? Instinctual, definitely. Intentional, maybe. Whales are intelligent. Why couldn't whatever Titus is be as well?" I closed my eyes, feeling all the sleep I'd lost through the project catching up with me. I don't know what's worse. The thought that the fall knows what it's doing, or that it's just doing it as a survival mechanism. Not that I even hold with this theory, obviously, I added rapidly. I'm more inclined to think Demetriou has it right. Just try not to fixate on this too much, or I swear you two will end up killing each other. I spent the next 4 days writing reports and drafting up potential messages to send out if the results of some infection were indeed found in the whale's remains. It was the other members of the team that studied the sample we brought up from the ocean, scrutinizing it under microscopes and carrying out as many tests and examinations as the tiny shred of flesh could endure. All the while, Demetriou and Reynolds argued over their findings as bitterly as past lovers, while Barden timidly attempted to mediate. I should have intervened. I don't know why I didn't. After that last visit to Titus, I'd been taken up with a strange, lethargic melancholy, prone to spending any breaks from my work on incessant walks along the tattered border of shoreline beyond the facility. There I listened to the song of the whales that seemed always to circle us now, or else to the call of the one we called Titus, if Reynolds was to be believed. I felt a longing for something I couldn't quite describe, a loneliness that my team no longer satisfied, particularly now that they'd grown close in a way I found myself unable to penetrate. Only when, early one morning, I was roused by Demetriou shaking me in my bed, did it occur to me that I'd missed the touch of another's flesh upon mine. Though not in this way, I sensed, but one closer, more intimate than that. "Reynolds and Barden are gone," said Demetriou. "They've taken a boat and some of the diving gear with them. They carried off the sample with them as well." I slapped at both of my cheeks sharply in an attempt to rouse myself. "What?" I said. "Why on earth would they do that?" Demetriou's eyes shifted guiltily aside. "There was a fight last night. The same thing we've been bickering about for days. The tissue we took from the whale. It's impossible, but our tests showed that it was from a still living animal." I said that there must be a mistake, and Reynolds shouted that I was lying to myself and that I knew the same thing she did. I don't remember much of what was said after that. We'd been drinking. There was some pushing each other, Barden getting in the middle as usual. But then he was on her side, saying I had to see it all now and that I should stop struggling all the time. He said it very calmly, like he was trying to make me understand. But I was so annoyed that I told him to shut up and went to bed. Then this morning they were both gone. Clearly they're going to dive to the fall. Horror clapped my throat shut, and for a second I only looked about me, wondering how I let my team slip into chaos within just a handful of days. "Mercutio's still in repair," I said. "We'll have to take the backup ROV out with us. There's no way we're going down there ourselves, not even on a sub. I think that's how this happened. We've always gotten too close." After informing the relevant authorities as to what we'd suspected to have happened, Demetriou, myself, and a crew of sleepy-eyed and bewildered mariners boarded the RV Sylvia on an emergency expedition. It was dangerous for us to have taken even this measure, I suspected, but I had to see with my own eyes what had happened to my team, to confirm the theory that had eaten through us all like rot. We found the boat Reynolds and Barden had stolen floating to the right of the area in which Titus was situated, unmanned and obviously abandoned. The deck was dry, implying that neither member of the team had returned to it even once from their dive. "Idiots," muttered Demetriou, though she was gray and shaking. There was no need to sacrifice themselves for this. Just to prove a point, I placed a hand on her damp shoulder. Her sweat had the same salt scent as the sea. "I don't think that's entirely why they did it," I said. "And I don't think you do either. You felt it, haven't you? Something you can't explain calling you out here? Down there?" Demetriou didn't reply, only stared at the empty boat drifting beside us. "You have," I said. "Just like I have. Like they did. You've just been trying to ignore it. They couldn't." I drew Demetriou away from the water, fearing that one of us would succumb to the same urge to pitch over the side of the vessel that had taken our companions. "Let's go down to control," I said. "Let's see what's happened." I and a few curious members of the crew stood watching tensely as Demetriou sunk the backup ROV into the depths with an uncharacteristic reluctance. The black shape of the whale fall filled the monitors, then gradually the details of its mutilated flesh and those that fed upon it. Reynolds and Barden were amongst those animals, their regulators torn free and cast aside so as to sink their teeth into the whale's hide as best they could. Their limbs kicked lightly at the water, signaling the impossible life that was still in them, despite the absence of air left in their lungs. "Mother of Jesus," said one of the mariners standing behind me. "What the hell is happening?" "Get closer," I said to Demetriou. "I need to see their faces." In silence, she obeyed, maneuvering the ROV until Reynolds and Barden's eyes shifted up to the camera in unison, each dull, lacking in their natural character, and yet compelled by some reflex of enduring vitality that was perhaps not their own. As the ROV turned this way, then that I saw that the mouths of our lost crew, like those of the scavengers around them, had grown into the flesh on which they feasted, fused with the great whale. All of them one. The eye of the fallen Titus watched us withdraw, And before the monitors shut off, I swear I saw it move. What happened after that I can describe only vaguely, being that myself, Dimitriou, and the crew of the RV Sylvia were all placed in urgent quarantine by government forces the moment we stepped foot on land. We were aware of the area being closed off to the public, air and sea crafts of endless variety swarming the waters at a safe distance from the fall. Presumably, the whale was contained and will likely be destroyed when the means of doing so without spreading any hypothetical infection have been determined by the relevant experts. Reynolds and Barden are considered legally dead, a fact one of the doctors on this lonely ward confided in me through pity, I suspect. I don't believe any of the government scientists understand what we discovered in the ocean, and perhaps only those joined with the whale fall ever could with any true clarity. The experts only know enough of its effects and their contagion to have separated my colleagues and I from one another in a guarded hospital somewhere very far inland. This done to protect, isolate, and most importantly, to study us. We few touched by the whale's influence to have survived. How long they intend to keep us here I do not know, nor will my keepers tell me. Perhaps when the whale is no more than an account guarded and concealed from public knowledge, having been blown apart by military explosives or brought up to the surface to burn. When this occurs, I wonder if I will know, if I'll sense it in the end of my connection with the whale, or if, like the after effects of illness, my experience will go on, my mind and sense of self ever altered by it. I still hear whale song frequently, likely only hallucination now, and yet it's real enough to me. I question if the other survivors in their separate rooms hear it as I do. The call to go down to it, summoning the water in my body and the salt in my blood. I don't know how much longer I could have resisted on the outside, even if, like Dimitriou, I'd tried. Days, I think, no more. Though I know now what would have become of me once I joined with that cult of flesh, I still can't help. In part, but want to meld with the great many that is the whale Titus and its thralls. For in my death, or half-death, life in all its beauty and horrible mystery would have persisted through me,